Ruth specifically asked me to talk about what's changed in the last 21 years over multiculturalism. And that made me think yesterday that, in fact, a lot has changed. And we all, of course, know that Tony has been absolutely successful in stopping the boats. And that was meant to make us all feel safer, more clear about our identity, and more stable in our sense of belonging. But at the same time, every day, we hear politicians saying that, in fact, our communities are more and more segregated, our identity has not come together into a coherent form, and that we're less safe today than ever before. If that is true, then their policies on multiculturalism in the last 15 years have failed. Because for 15 years and more, there's been a retreat away from multiculturalism in order to grant us a level of security, coherence, and comfort. So let's think a little bit about what it is that had to be abandoned, even though what has been put in place has not realised its own goals. First of all, the definition of multiculturalism was a quite contentious term, and Demos has already talked about this idea about how do you settle migrants into Australia. With this idea of settlement became the need for special services, language, health, education, and so forth. But at the same time, a lot of people started talking about the opportunity to have a new kind of cultural dialogue about what sort of society, what sort of identity, what sorts of communities we build. So the idea about multiculturalism first was a description of our society, because we are a diverse society, people of demographic conditions which is of a level of diversity that's almost unparalleled in the world. But it also became a prescription. In other words, a demand that society should change in order to reflect and facilitate that dialogue amongst those different people, not to impose a core and standard set of rules on those people. So it shifted from description to prescription. And as it became more clear that prescription is a kind of ideological, or has certain inclinations and trajectories with it, that it became more contentious. And so we start to move away from this idea that it was an opportunity for rethinking, because that was perceived as a threat and a disruption and an undermining and a dilution of the existing traditions, institutions, values that underpinned our Anglo foundations of our society of Australia. But I think that was already a distortion of how multiculturalism was actually first defined. Because when people said we want to have a dialogue in order to discuss the opportunities for change, that didn't necessarily mean I want to impose my values onto the existing values. It meant just the right to enter into a conversation as to whether we can persuade each other, and maybe you shift a little bit and I might shift a little bit, rather than one imposes one predetermined and fixed set of values onto another. So that, I think, was a missed opportunity. There was a failure to understand and communicate the way in which multiculturalism wasn't the imposition of values, but the opportunity for conversations.